Chapter 12. Entering the house, I called over my shoulder, "I'll be back in a moment. I need to change out of these clothes." Since I still had on my work attire, I figured it was a plausible excuse and would give me the breathing space I needed. I walked into my bedroom and shut the door. I'd stripped off my blouse and tossed it on the bed and was headed to the dresser for a t-shirt when the door opened behind me. Roberto entered the room, closed and locked the door, before leaning against it with his arms folded across his chest. The man looked like he'd taken root. It was evident from his demeanor he wasn't going anywhere soon.
"What was that about?"
he asked quietly. "I don't know, but I guarantee you I'll be having a little talk with both Ron and Timothy as soon as I get to work tomorrow." I unzipped my skirt and let it drop to the floor.
"That wasn't what I was referring to."
Dang it. He hadn't taken my diversionary topic, and the sight of me in the sexy underwear he'd purchased wasn't providing as much of a distraction as I'd hoped. I reached inside the drawer and pulled out a t-shirt before slipping it over my head. Out of a different drawer, I took a pair of shorts and slipped them on.
"Nina."
I inquired, as though my mind were elsewhere instead of very much in this room with him. I turned to find him right behind me. The man was quick. "Justin won't be pleased to find you in here," I reminded him. His eyes narrowed.
"Justine will just have to deal. There were things not said tonight that I'd like to be privy to. And it was more than your discovering I'm a minister."
"He's right, you know. I'm not the greatest material for a minister's wife," I told him, once again trying to deflect from the main issue.
"You're not marrying a minister. You're marrying me. Nina, I want to know what it was about your old pastor that made Pastor back down and apologize."
From the firmness in his voice, I knew there'd be no more delaying. My shoulders drooped, and I sighed heavily. Crossing over to the bed, I grabbed a pillow from the pile. Shoving the rest to the side, I sat with my back against the headboard, folded in on myself with my knees drawn up and pillow hugged to my chest. Propping my chin on the pillow, I stared into space as my mind drifted back to that miserable time in my life. Vaguely, I was aware of Roberto coming to sit in front of me, eyes intently focused on my face. I was young, 22 or 23. Tyrone and I had recently separated. During the last few months we were together, I hadn't worked. Couldn't find a job, so I stayed home with the kids. The apartment was in Tyrone's name. He'd been kind enough to tell the office manager he was moving out, and didn't know what his wife and kids were going to do. The car was also in his name, though it was my money that paid for it. So I was left with no home and no transportation. I sent the kids to his mom until I could get back on my feet and moved in with a friend. The only place I knew for sure would hire me was the center where Tyrone and his married, pregnant girlfriend worked. So I took a job there. As you can imagine, it was a highly stressful situation. I flicked a brief glance at him. He was quiet, seemingly willing to let me tell this my way, something I appreciated. I hadn't been a Christian long, and I was still feeling my way. It was a confusing time in my life. I was angry, hurt, depressed, the list goes on and on. The only relief I felt was in church. It was summertime and everyone seemed to be running a revival. I think I was at every service. It didn't matter whose church it was being held in. Mount Olive, in particular, became a refuge for me. Pastor Robinson and his wife were longtime friends of my mom's. Though Mount Olive was a Baptist church, He'd previously been a member of the holiness church I grew up in, so being there felt right at home. I stopped to gather my words. He had the gift of prophecy, and I always left his service encouraged. He knew about my situation and began to counsel me, offering practical wisdom and spiritual advice. I'd stop by the church sometimes just to talk. I looked at Roberto. I really don't know how I made it through. I didn't have any family nearby. I wanted my kids with me in the worst way. And in spite of all he'd done, I missed Tyrone. I think I would have taken him back had he shown the least inclination of being interested. I sighed and rubbed my arms, gazing down at the mattress. Robinson noted the stress I was under, said God had showed him I held everything inside. He said, "You carry your tension right here," and pinched the tendon in my shoulders, which were knotted up to the point where it was hard and painful. He said if I kept on, I'd give myself a heart attack. His suggestion was for me to take a walk on the beach and let the ocean calm me. Go for a swim. He said he'd join me, and we could talk. Roberto muttered something under his breath. I pulled my legs in tighter and wrapped my arms around them, staring over Roberto's shoulder at the wall. By this time, I'd moved back home with my mother. It was a long drive to work and church, but I did it. Following his lead, I did as he instructed and met him at the beach. We walked and talked, and then he headed off onto one of the nature paths. I trailed behind him. When we reached a certain point, he stopped and began questioning me about Tyrone, my family, my twins, my plans for the future. As we talked, he circled behind me and massaged my shoulders. I stiffened, uncomfortable with him touching me. Gradually, I relaxed and concentrated more on the conversation than his actions. He asked if I'd worn my swimsuit, and I had, but I was uneasy, so I kept my outer clothes on. He slipped his hands under my collar to get at my skin, and I grabbed the front of my shirt to keep it from opening when his actions caused the buttons to unfasten. Again, I was uneasy, but this man was my pastor, longtime family friend, and he was married. I breathed a sigh of relief when he stopped and came and stood before me. I swallowed. This was the difficult part. He straightened my collar, then casually reached inside the front of my V-necked bathing suit, scooped out my breast, and lowered his mouth to my nipple. I glanced at Roberto, saw the anger in his face, and quickly looked away. It happened so fast. I just stood there, frozen. I blinked a couple of times to moisten my eyes, which felt like they had sand in them. When he finished sucking on my breast, he tucked it back inside and rebuttoned my shirt, saying, "I would make love to you, but my daddy taught me it was wrong." Roberto shifted his weight, and it drew my gaze to his. I don't think I said a word, just numbly walked to the parking lot and got into my car. I took the long way home. I kept going over everything in my mind, wondering what I'd said or done to make him believe I'd welcome his attention. It had to be my fault, right?
Shock.
Roberto murmured, watching me carefully.
You were in shock.
I barely heard him. Then anger set in. How could I have been so blind, so stupid? Why hadn't I done anything, said anything, knocked him on his butt? If he'd tried to take things further, would I just have spread my legs and let him? Roberto reacted then. His hand snaked out to grab my ankles. Tugging sharply, he had me flat on my back, the pillow snatched from me and thrown to the side before my equilibrium adjusted to my change in position. Then he came down on top of me. Framing my face with his hands, he spoke sternly.
It was not your fault. Don't blame yourself for what that bastard did. He preyed on your naivete and trust. It was only the grace of God protecting you that kept him from doing more.
I tried to shake my head at him. I should have realized what was happening. Looking back, it's so clear. I remember he mentioned once a lot of his female members in my position had problems with their sexual urges. Asked me if it was something I struggled with. When I said no, he asked me why. I told him God was keeping me. He never mentioned it again, but I should have realized there was something off about him asking me such a question, I contended.
Why? He was your spiritual leader. He was counseling you through a rough spot in your life. For a baby Christian, recently separated from her spouse under conditions such as yours, it was a real concern. How are you to know he had an ulterior motive?
He asked sharply. He didn't understand. I further explained, trying to make him see. He used to nag me all the time about my cooking. I know your grandmother and your mama. I know you can cook. When are you gonna fix me something? I mimicked his voice. He finally wore me down to the point where I agreed to let him come by the house after work one evening. I shook my head again, unable to believe my stupidity. I remember telling Tyrone about it. It was during a period when we were considering reconciling. Mom was out of town. Tyrone made me come and get him. By then, the car had been repossessed, and I was the only one with a vehicle. Said he didn't like the idea of this guy coming to see me that time of night, pastor or not. At the time, Robinson was working second shift. I remember Robinson's surprise when he walked in and saw my husband there. At the time, I thought it was because Tyrone and I were together after everything that happened. But later, I realized the truth. Roberto leaned in so close my eyes crossed.
Nina, listen to me. You said this guy was a friend of your mother's, right?
Yes.
That means he was at least 20 years older than you. Am I correct?
I nodded.
The man was a predator. You weren't stupid. You were played by an older, experienced man who used his position and relationship with your family to sneak under your guard. I guarantee you weren't his first victim. He was too smooth. He knew exactly what to do. You said whenever you felt uneasy, he backed off and turned things spiritual. It probably made you question your instincts.
My eyes lost focus as I thought back. Yeah, it did. If he'd have been anyone else, I'd have sworn he was making a play for me and acted accordingly.
But because he was a leader, someone you trusted, you thought you were overreacting, didn't you?
There was so much understanding in his gaze. I nodded.
That's how these guys operate. You barely hear anything unsavory about them because they're so subtle in their seduction. Most victims blame themselves, thinking they must have sent out the wrong signal or something to that effect.
He stroked a lock of hair out of my face.
What he did was a type of rape.
I stirred beneath him, shying away from such an ugly word. My uneasiness must have been reflected in my expression.
Think about it, Nina. What he did was no different from what child molesters do. He gained your trust and then abused it.
For the first time in years, tears welled up in my eyes. I felt so dirty, so ashamed. I'd always considered myself to be a good judge of character. After that, I didn't, especially not where men were concerned. He wiped away the tears escaping to run down the side of my face with his thumbs. I left Mount Olive. For a while, I looked at all men with suspicion. None of them could be trusted. I was angry, bitter, and hearing all those good Christian women at House of Prayer complaining about their husbands, speaking about them in a derogatory manner, only made things worse, I admitted.
And now?
He asked. I struggle. I know it's wrong to blame all men for the actions of a few. That not all men are bad, but it's hard. I'd just gotten to the point I'd forgiven and was willing to take a chance on love when Ronald came along. I shrugged. You know how that ended.
Then I thank God that you were willing to take a chance on me,
Roberto said, sincerely. Looking deep into his eyes, I felt it only fair to warn him. I'm not very trusting. There will always be a part of me that waits for you to mess up, proving you're just like the rest. His gaze flicked from my eyes to my mouth and back.
Then with the help of God, I'll just have to keep proving you wrong.
He lowered his head, and his lips met mine in a sweet kiss. My arms came up to wrap around his neck and play in his hair as my body softened under his. After the emotional intensity of the last few hours, soft and gentle didn't cut it for me. I dug my nails into his scalp and thrust my tongue into his mouth, inviting his to come out and play. Roberto moaned and took my passion, magnified it, and gave it back full force. Things were getting interesting when a knock sounded at the door.
Dad, you in there? That boy has the worst timing,
He muttered as he rolled off the bed and headed for the door. A little breathless, I hugged a pillow and pulled another under my head, curling onto my side facing the door. Justin tried to peek in, probably checking to make sure I was decently covered, but his father blocked his view. Roberto nudged Justin back, slipped out into the hallway, and pulled the door shut behind him. Through the wood, I could hear the murmur of their voices. Then Roberto re-entered the room, once more shutting the door. "Leave it cracked," I instructed. He arched an eyebrow at me, then deliberately reached down and turned the lock. I groaned. "Somebody gave you a minister's license?" I asked in disbelief. He grinned wickedly at me and strutted toward the bed. I rolled onto my stomach, legs kicking back and forth, and watched him prowl toward me. This man did serious things to my body temperature. A girly sigh of admiration escaped me. He sprawled on the bed beside me, lying in the opposite direction, his head propped on his hand near my feet.
I'm an excellent minister.
He smirked.
And we're not through talking.
The grin on my face faded. He might not be done, but I was tired of playing around in the past. I turned my face away and laid my head on the pillow. The mattress shifted as he moved, but I refused to look. I changed my mind when he crawled up my body and glanced over my shoulder to see what he was doing. Roberto lowered himself until we were lying cheek to cheek. I couldn't help but smile. His body completely covered mine. "You're crazy," I told him.
About you?
He nuzzled our cheeks together. You expect us to talk like this?
If it keeps you from shutting me out.
I swallowed. Sorry, some things I'd rather forget.
There's a few things in my life I'd rather not think about, so I understand. I let this go if I thought you were truly over it.
He explained. What makes you think I'm not?
Your response to Pastor Williams, for one.
Since I'd earlier come to the realization my experience with Robinson had tainted my relationship with Pastor, I had no defense. What else?
If you're healed, it wouldn't be this difficult for you to discuss.
He concluded.
Have you been back to Mount Olive since it happened?
He kissed my ear. Once, a few years back. God sent me. I had to let him minister to me.
What happened?
He called me out, as I knew he would, gave me the prophecy. I listened and went back to my seat. When church was over, I spoke to a few friends and left. I haven't looked back since.
And Pastor Williams?
I sighed heavily. Or tried to. With his weight on me, breathing deeply wasn't exactly easy. I really do have a deep respect for Pastor. The man and not just his position. When he first arrived, I wasn't exactly feeling him, but then I wasn't feeling any male of the species. I watched, listened, and as time passed, he proved himself to be a man of integrity. Roberto rolled off me to the side and pulled away until we lay face to face, our heads resting on the same pillow.
Then why?
Because he's always questioning me, pushing for more than I want to give. Gets my back up, especially now. Besides, I hate talking about my feelings. I'm not very articulate, and he has this way of twisting my words, changing their meaning. It's annoying, frustrating.
You don't seem to be having any problems articulating yourself with me.
He observed. This is different.
How so?
Well, because I thought for a minute. Because I trust you not to use what I say to hurt me. I finished slowly, a bit stunned.
You trust me?
He repeated, with a questioning lilt at the end. Yes, I admitted. And amazingly, the world didn't stop spinning and the sun didn't fall from the sky. I, Nina Wallace, trusted a man.